The restaurant's windows caught the last fire of sunset, glass panes glowing like embers against the cold Chicago skyline. Inside, white linen and loges hummed through the Lakeview Grill, the kind of place where ambition wore a tie and silence carried weight. I arrived first. Old habit. 30 years in business had taught me the value of timing, of letting others feel as though they were stepping into your frame. I took a quiet corner table, back to the wall, eyes on the door. Nancy arrived in a flutter of warmth, her laughter softening the stiff air around her. My daughter, bright, hopeful, radiant in a way only people in love seem to glow. And beside her, a man walked with his chin just a little higher than comfort allowed. Derek Harrington, the fiancé. I had seen pictures. I had heard stories. But photographs never captured tone, and stories rarely revealed the truth. In person, Derek's presence was studied. His suit crisp, watch gleaming, handshake calculated to land firm but not too firm. Everything about him said, "I've read the manual on success and I believe I've mastered it." "Mr. Wood," he greeted, sliding into the chair opposite me. "Finally, we meet." Nancy beamed, touching the diamond ring that caught the amber light above us. She wanted this to go well. I could feel her eyes measuring every pause, every gesture between us. Derek didn't wait for menus or small talk. He leaned in, voice smooth, rehearsed. "Nancy tells me you've stepped back from work, taking things easy these days." I held his gaze. The words weren't cruel, not yet. But the tilt of his smile, the slight emphasis on stepped back, made the question feel like a scalpel. A quiet cut, testing where the wound might open. "I'm retired," I said simply, unfolding my napkin with deliberate calm. "Of course," he replied, as though retirement were a synonym for irrelevance. "Well, I've been with Technova for 3 years now. Senior manager in corporate sales. Our numbers are up 40% under my watch." He said it the way a man might announce he'd conquered Rome. I let the silence stretch. The waiter arrived. Nancy ordered wine. Derek ordered salmon, extravagant. I asked for the soup special. His brow lifted just slightly, and in that single flicker of expression, he thought he had me figured out. What he didn't know, the walls of my study back home told a different story. Photographs of product launches. Plaques no stranger could enter my house and dismiss. Articles calling me a quiet revolutionary. Technova wasn't just his employer. It was my blood, my fingerprints etched into its foundation. But tonight wasn't about truth. Tonight was about character. Nancy reached for Derek's hand, smiling nervously. I raised my glass of water and studied the man across from me, the man who would marry my daughter. The sun slipped below the horizon. Shadows claimed the skyline. And I thought, let's see who you really are, Derek. The first course arrived with the quiet grace of a practiced waiter. Silver clinked, wine breathed, and the city outside vanished behind velvet drapes. It should have been a simple dinner, a polite bridge between two families soon to be bound together. But Derek treated it like a stage. He leaned back, letting his voice carry just enough to brush the tables around us. "You know, Mr. Wood, the market's brutal these days. Survival belongs to the adaptable. People who can't keep up, well, they fall behind. No shame in it, it's just evolution." He smiled as if he were delivering wisdom. What he was delivering was judgment. Nancy's fingers tightened around her wineglass. She laughed softly, too softly, trying to sand down the sharpness of his words. "Derek, Dad isn't behind. It's fine," I interrupted, not looking away from him. "He's sharing his perspective." And Derek took that as encouragement. He launched into tales of 60-hour workweeks, corporate seminars, and his vision of climbing Technova's ladder. Every anecdote seemed designed to remind me, and perhaps Nancy, of his supposed superiority. He spoke of fresh blood, revitalizing industries, of dead weight holding companies back. He didn't notice how those phrases lingered between us like smoke, aimed squarely at the man he assumed had nothing left to offer. I stirred my soup slowly, the steam rising in delicate spirals. Each word of his, I stored away like evidence in a courtroom. "Dad's being modest," Nancy said at one point, her voice carrying a hint of desperation. "He's always been in business." Derek chuckled, not cruelly, but with that awful condescension of a man who thinks he's the only one who sees clearly. "Sure, but the business world now, it's not what it used to be. It's a battlefield of innovation. Honestly, I wouldn't expect someone older to keep pace. No offense." The word older landed heavier than his fork on porcelain. I smiled faintly, as if he'd said something clever. No offense taken. But inside, I felt Nancy's eyes dart between us, searching for cracks. She didn't know what I was planning. Not yet. All she saw was her fiancé puffing up like a peacock, her father absorbing blow after blow without flinching. What she didn't see was the calculation, the patience. Because the truth wasn't just that Derek was arrogant. It was that he was blind. He thought respect was something earned by numbers, titles, or the cut of a suit. He hadn't yet learned that respect could be lost far faster, often in a single conversation, a single careless insult. I let him talk. About quarterly growth, about disruptors, about the weak who couldn't survive the new order. Every word painted him more vividly, and every sentence was a brushstroke in the portrait he was creating for himself. When the check came, he reached for it with theatrical generosity. "I'll cover this. After all, I know budgets can be tricky." Nancy winced. I laid down 2 crisp bills, enough to cover my portion, and rose with calm precision. "Thank you for dinner," I said evenly. "And for the advice. I'll remember it." I left him blinking at the cash, unaware he'd just given me every reason I needed. The lesson had begun. 2 days after that dinner, the spring air carried the scent of rain and earth through my back garden. I was kneeling by the tomato plants when I heard footsteps on the deck. "Dad!" Nancy's voice wavered, not with casual warmth but with something heavier. I wiped soil from my hands and turned. She stood there without makeup, her hair tied back, engagement ring catching the gray light. For the first time in weeks, she looked less like a glowing bride and more like my little girl again. Uncertain, searching. "Want some tea?" I asked, buying a moment. "No," she crossed the deck and sat on the weathered bench I'd built the previous summer. "I need answers." I sat beside her, the boards creaking softly under our weight. She didn't look at me right away, just twisted the ring around her finger. "At dinner, you didn't fight back. Not once. You let Derek say all those things and just smiled. That's not you. That's not the man who raised me." Her words cut deeper than Derek's ever could. I breathed in slow, steady. "Sometimes silence speaks louder than anger." "That's not silence," she snapped, her eyes wet. "That's hiding. And you're hiding something, Dad. I know you are." The garden blurred for a moment as I studied her, my daughter, whose instincts had always been sharper than I gave her credit for. She was right, of course. "I've seen the papers in your study," she pressed. "The awards, the old photographs. I know you didn't just work in business. You built something. And Derek has no idea." Her voice cracked. "Why?" I rested my elbows on my knees, staring at the dirt-streaked ground. "Because, sweetheart, Derek needed to show me who he was when he thought I had nothing to offer him. Not who he is when the spotlight's on. Not when he's performing for bosses or clients. The real man shows himself when he believes no one important is watching." She shook her head, frustration spilling out. "That's not fair. You're setting him up. He doesn't know he's being tested." I turned to her then, my voice low but steady. "Life doesn't warn us when the tests come. It just hands them to us and watches how we respond. If Derek is the man you think he is, this won't matter. But if he's not..." I let the thought hang. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "And if I lose him because of this?" I placed my hand over hers, feeling the cold band of the ring against my skin. "Then you've lost nothing worth keeping." The silence that followed was heavier than the storm clouds gathering above. She pulled her hand back slowly, staring at the garden as if the dirt might hold the answers. Finally, she whispered, "He's going to hate you when he finds out." "Maybe," I said softly. "The question is, will you?" She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the war in her eyes, love for her fiancé colliding with trust in her father. The turning point wasn't Derek. It was Nancy, and I knew the storm was coming. The chapel glowed under amber sconces, polished with pews lined with flowers too perfect to be real. Guests murmured in clusters, laughter echoing against the vaulted ceiling. It should have been a rehearsal filled with joy. Instead, it pulsed with something tighter, sharper. I entered quietly, my charcoal suit pressed, my expression composed. Nancy caught my eye near the altar, radiant in her rehearsal dress yet strained at the edges. She gave me a quick smile, half reassurance, half plea. Derek stood in the center aisle, surrounded by colleagues from Technova. His posture was immaculate, tie straight, shoulders squared. He looked less like a groom and more like a man preparing to present quarterly earnings. Everyone, Derek's voice rang with practiced ease. This is my future father-in-law, Porter Wood. He gestured toward me with the flourish of a salesman unveiling a product. A retiree, enjoying a modest life in Evanston. The words floated through the chapel like perfume, sweetened, but unmistakably designed to establish rank. Retiree, modest life. The subtext was clear, irrelevant, small, beneath. Polite nods followed. One colleague, a sharp-looking woman in a navy blazer, extended her hand. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Wood. Derek says you're enjoying retirement. Very much so, I said calmly, shaking her hand. Though retirement can be more educational than people realize. The woman smiled politely, already turning back to Derek. He thrived under the attention, puffing with pride as he spoke of Technova's innovation, of his growing influence, of the future of the company. Nancy shifted uneasily, her fingers twisting in the fabric of her dress. She was watching both of us now, every word, every glance. She alone understood there was a second script unfolding beneath the rehearsed one. When the officiant called us to practice the walk down the aisle, Derek sidled closer, his tone lowered just enough for me to hear. I know you want this to be perfect for Nancy, Mr. Wood. Just try not to draw too much attention. Walter's going to be here tomorrow, and first impressions are everything. I met his eyes, letting the silence stretch until discomfort flickered behind his confident mask. Then I said, softly but firmly, "Be careful with judgments, Derek. Tomorrow might surprise you." He chuckled, dismissing my words as the ramblings of an old man. Mr. Wood, I read character for a living. Sales is all about knowing who people really are. I've never been wrong. The arrogance in his tone echoed through the quiet chapel, louder than the organ practicing somewhere in the distance. Never, I asked, my voice carrying the faintest edge of steel. Not once. He straightened, confidence radiating like a shield. People reveal themselves quickly, if you know what to look for. I smiled then, slow and deliberate, buttoning my jacket. You're absolutely right. Tomorrow you'll have the chance to prove it. Nancy's eyes widened at my words, a silent warning trapped behind them. The rehearsal continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. Guests returned to chatter, laughter resumed, but an undercurrent hummed between Derek and me. He thought he'd just asserted dominance. What he didn't realize was that the real performance hadn't even begun. And as I left the chapel, Nancy's voice caught me at the door. "Dad," she whispered urgently. "Don't destroy him." I paused, looking at my daughter. The hope, the fear, the love warring in her eyes. "Sometimes," I said quietly, "destruction isn't the point. Revelation is." The stage was set. Tomorrow the curtain would rise. The ballroom shimmered under chandeliers, crystal light spilling across polished marble. Champagne flowed, laughter swelled, and the string quartet threaded elegance through the air. It was the picture of celebration, but I felt the hum beneath it, the charge before lightning. Derek worked the room like a campaigner, shaking hands, introducing Nancy with the pride of a man displaying a prize. His colleagues clustered around, their admiration feeding him. I watched from near the bar, patient, cufflinks catching the light in quiet defiance. Then it happened. Walter Clean entered, dignified in his navy suit, silver hair gleaming beneath the chandeliers. The conversations shifted instantly, gravity pulling toward him. Derek straightened, chest expanding, his smile brightening into something almost blinding. "Mr. Clean," Derek called, guiding Nancy to his side. "An honor to have you here. I'd like you to meet my wife, Nancy, and her father." I stepped forward, measured, calm. "This is Porter Wood," Derek continued, his voice smooth but edged with superiority. "He's well retired now, lives modestly, not much into business these days." The words landed with deliberate softness, like a knife slipped between ribs. Walter turned to me. His eyes dropped, just for a second, to the platinum cufflinks glinting with Technova's emblem. Then his face transformed. "Porter," his voice carried across the hall. Not polite recognition, but stunned disbelief. "Porter Wood." The conversations froze. Champagne glasses hung suspended in midair. "Yes," I said evenly, extending my hand. "It's good to see you, Walter." Walter ignored my hand and instead pulled me into a fierce embrace, laughter breaking from him like thunder. "Good God, man, what are you doing here? You didn't tell me?" He stopped, eyes flicking toward Derek. His voice dropped, sharp now. "Wait, did you introduce him as Unemployed?" Derek's face drained of color. "Mr. Clean, I didn't realize." Walter's voice rose, cutting through the silence. "Didn't realize? Porter is my partner, my co-founder. Without him, Technova wouldn't exist." Gasps rippled through the room. Colleagues stared, mouths open. Nancy clutched Derek's arm, but he was frozen, his ambition collapsing in on itself. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I simply stood, every insult Derek had delivered hanging now in the balance between us. Walter's eyes narrowed. "This is the man you've been speaking down to for months? The man you called irrelevant?" His voice dropped to ice. "You're finished, Derek." The groom's confidence shattered. He stammered, hands trembling. "I didn't know." He never said. I finally spoke, my words low but clear. "Respect doesn't require resumes, Derek. It requires character. Something you believed you'd mastered." Silence wrapped the room. Even the quartet had stopped, bows suspended midair. Derek looked at me then, eyes wide with something rawer than fear. Shame. His arrogance had been peeled away, leaving nothing but a boy caught naked before the crowd. I let the weight of the moment sit. Every guest, every colleague, every family member bore witness. The truth had been revealed. And for the first time, Derek Harrington had nothing to say. The ballroom breathed again, but differently now. Conversations resumed in hushed tones, guests leaning close as though the truth had shifted the very air. Derek stood pale and trembling, his hand limp in Nancy's grasp. Walter had already stepped aside, his face tight with fury, his words, "You're finished," still echoing like a gavel in the hall. Nancy looked at me across the circle of stunned faces. Her eyes brimmed with tears, her lips pressed together as though she might either cry or scream. She had asked me not to destroy him, and yet here he stood undone, not by me but by his own choices. I moved closer. Derek's chest heaved, his composure stripped bare. He looked not like the ambitious executive who had lectured me, but like a boy cornered in a room too large for him. "Derek," I said quietly, so only he and Nancy could hear, "you wanted to teach me about ambition, about evolution. Tonight, you learned that character evolves too, or it doesn't survive." His mouth opened, searching for words that weren't there. I turned to Walter. He's young, arrogant, yes, but perhaps this lesson doesn't need to end his life before it truly begins. Walter frowned. "Porter, after the disrespect." "Respect isn't taught by punishment," I interrupted gently. "It's taught by consequence." The room had stilled again, people straining to hear. I let my voice carry just enough. "Derek will keep his position, but only if he remembers this moment for the rest of his life. If he forgets, then you'll have your answer." Walter studied me, then Derek. Finally, with a reluctant nod, he said, 6 months. One misstep, and he's gone. Relief crashed across Derek's face, followed swiftly by humiliation. He knew his survival hadn't come from his talent or his numbers, but from my mercy. And mercy, I knew, could feel heavier than judgment. Nancy's hand found mine, trembling. Gratitude swam in her eyes, tangled with heartbreak. She leaned closer, whispering, "Why spare him?" "Because," I murmured, "a man doesn't become better by being crushed. Sometimes he becomes better by being broken, then rebuilt." The music resumed, hesitant at first, then flowing as though the quartet had been holding its breath too. Guests raised glasses again, but their eyes lingered on us, the story of the night already weaving into legend. Derek drifted through the rest of the evening like a ghost, his laughter hollow, his charm threadbare. He thanked guests who now looked at him differently, each interaction a reminder of the ground that had shifted beneath him. When the night ended, I stood alone at the edge of the emptying ballroom. Nancy and Derek walked out together, her arm looped through his, though her gaze kept flicking back toward me. In that glance was a question she would have to answer on her own. Could she love the man beneath the armor, or had she fallen for the armor itself? I didn't know. That choice wasn't mine to make. But as I looked at the dying glow of the chandeliers, I thought of Derek's words, that people reveal themselves quickly, if you know what to look for. He had been right, and tonight everyone had looked.